In today's episode, we're gonna get that S54 started. That's right, we're gonna hear the rumble of the S54. We're gonna see what that exhaust is actually doing for us, and we're gonna do it in 4 different steps. The first step is fuel. We gotta make sure we got our fuel, we got everything plumbed up. The second step is going to be electronics. We're gonna make sure that all of our sensors and all the wiring on the DME is all hooked up. The third is gonna be powers and grounds, making sure that we've got our powers and our grounds hooked up to the DME and the engine and the rest of the chassis. And then the fourth thing is fluids. And then we're gonna turn that key. All right, so first let's talk about fuel. What we have going on in here is we've got our fuel send line, and then this here down below is our fuel return line. The send line goes into this regulator, and then from the regulator it goes out to our send line right here, which then goes into the hard line into the S54, goes through the fuel rail and into the injectors. But first, let's add some fuel. Yeah, we haven't opened this up in a while. Okay, so while that fills up, I'm gonna take a look underneath to make sure that I don't have any leaks. And so far, so good. But I won't really know if I have any major leaks until I actually apply pressure to the system, which means actuating the fuel pump and seeing where there might be fuel leaks, whether it be in the fuel filter, in the fuel rail, or the regulator itself. Well, looks like I do have a leak. I gotta get to it quickly. Well, there it is. I think it's just that one. So yeah, I gotta tighten that one up. Let me see how loose it is actually. Ooh, looks like I can tighten it up by hand. All right, let's get to it. All right, I had to remove the exhaust while it was leaking, but I did get it here. This guy was just a little bit loose, so I tightened that up, and now the leak is gone. I'm glad I was able to get to it while it was leaking so that I knew that it wasn't leaking anymore once I actually tightened it all up. So you have to tighten a 19 millimeter down against itself. So you have to hold this one here, and then you have to use another one on that other nut and push it down just like a brake line, basically. All right, so we're gonna do this in baby steps. We fixed one leak. Now we have to bring the car down. We're going to pressure test it manually with 12 volts directly to the pump. And we're gonna pressurize the system and see where the other leaks are. Not only by the regulator, but more importantly by the fuel filter itself. All right, so I have an independent 12 volt system, even though I have the 12 volts basically disconnected. Got this side to ground, and that guy here is my fuel pump. So I'm going to power that up and see where the leaks are. Ready? I can hear it. I think it's pulling fuel, but I don't see any leaks yet. All right, I think I figured it out really quickly. I actually have the fuel pump wired backwards under the seat, so I gotta fix that. The reason I figured that out is because I actually put the power to the negative side and then the negative side here. You can hear all that. That is the fuel pump priming. You hear that? There it is. Okay, so I got a leak. Let's fix that. Okay, so I did fix this leak right in there. I had to replace the O-ring, and while I was at it, I cleaned and made sure that all the O-rings on all the injectors were good too. I also swapped out the fuel pump backwards, so now it's the negative on the negative side and positive. Let's hear this. Nothing. All right, we're in great shape to move on to the next thing. All right, we've addressed 2 major leaks and the fuel pump was backwards. So we fixed that. We know now that we have a perfect fuel system. Now let's move on to the sensor wiring. All right, so on this side of the engine, in terms of sensors that need to be wired up, just about everything is wired. We've got our throttle body wired, and the actuator seems to work just fine. We've got our ICV installed and wired, and we still need to put our hose clamps on here. We've got these 2 sensors here. One is the oil level and one is the mass airflow. We don't need the oil level for getting the engine started, and we also don't need the mass airflow since we're going to be going with an alpha N. This here is for our evap. This is the solenoid that allows the flow back to the engine. And we've got our TPS. So we've gotten everything installed here. On this end, And I don't think that we're missing anything. We've got our intake crank position sensor there that plugs into this right here. And let's take a look at the other side. All right, on this side, we've got our pre-cat O2 sensors. We've got post-cat O2 sensors as well, but we don't have to hook them up, although it's not too difficult to do. We've got our exhaust temperature sensor. We've got this guy right here is our exhaust camshaft sensor, and that's installed right down there. So on this side, we're pretty good. We got all of our coils. We've got our spark plugs. I think we're good there. We've got this guy here. This is our Vano solenoid connector that goes down at the bottom there. And there really isn't anything else on this side of the engine in terms of sensors that need to be installed. We've got our fan sensor here. This is E30 stuff, E30 chassis stuff that we'll install. And we've got our E30 temperature sensor here that we don't need to install either. Of course, we're going to work about powers and grounds next. So let's just go right into powers and grounds. So we've got powers and grounds to the DME. This is a power for that's coming from battery that goes directly to the starter and the alternator. So this is our terminal. That's our battery terminal right there. And we need to install that. Here we've got the DME grounds and powers. Right here we've got our relay. This is ground, power. So we've got to basically hook up all of our powers and grounds to this, and we have to get our DME installed, although I don't really want to install our DME quite yet because I want to make sure that I can turn the engine after getting oil in it before it actually having fired up. So one of the things that I try to check for is the basic stuff here. And I wanted to check to see if I had ignition. So the ignition comes through the black wire with a yellow stripe, understandably. And that should have gone through here and go directly into here, which is that's the starter wire. That's your hot wire whenever you turn the key. And what I found was it actually doesn't. It goes through this connector here, which on this harness, which is supplied, is all just black wires. So this is supposed to be an S54 to E30 swap wiring harness, which I think overall has been doing a pretty good job of making things a little easier. But, you know, in this case, it goes to this wire here on this connector. And this connector here doesn't have a mate plug on the S54 harness. On the actual S54 harness, it actually is this plug. This blue plug is different. And this blue plug has that black wire with a yellow stripe. So I need to cut this wire. I need to cut this wire here, and I need to mate them together in order to make sure that when I turn the key, it goes through the C101, it goes through this connector, it goes into here, and it goes into the S54 harness directly to this guy right here, which goes right down below. So honestly, guys, it's just a lot of that. It's a lot of just checking your wiring, just making sure that everything is correct before you start applying power, before you turn that key, making sure you have fuel, making sure that all those connections are good, powers, grounds, your signals, your start wire, your switch power versus your constant on power, or else you're going to have a battery draining issue. So there's a lot of things you need to check before you ever turn that key and expect the engine to start. So that's what I'm doing this video for, is to help you guys understand my mode of thinking, the correct mode of thinking, steps by step in order to get this thing to work. All right, so I just finished up all the wiring that I need to do here in order to get this thing to fire up. I got my powers, I got all of my grounds. I mean, they're all going to one node right now, but that's okay. All my powers are going to one node right now, and that's okay. We're going to end up cleaning all this up. This is just proof of concept. This guy here will be covered. This is not a red power wire. Rather, it is our ignition wire, and that is going to end up, it's coming from the custom S54 harness directly into the S54 harness. So it basically is now connected to key through the C101. So now I've got basically everything ready to go. Let me apply power and just make sure that everything is working. All right, so I checked all my powers and grounds, and they are all good in the engine bay. And now I wanted to turn this on so that I could hear the fuel pump priming. If I turn this key and the fuel pump primes, then I know that I'm in great shape and the DME is turned on and powered up. And it's working. So now that I've got the fuel pump primed, that tells me a lot about how the engine is functioning. That the DME is doing its job, it's getting the signal, it's turning on the EKP relay, and it's allowing fuel to go into the engine. And I know that the fuel works because I already pressure tested it, and I know I don't have leaks. So I know that if those injectors open, this thing is going to fire up. So having said all that, what we need to do now is just put oil in it and turn that key. All right, so I think I've got everything here. We're gonna do a first crank first, and then we're gonna do a start. But in order to do the crank, I wanna make sure that I'm getting oil flowing in the engine before I just get it started. So basically what I did was I removed the intake caps, so generously provided by Amir Pasha. Link down in the description if you're interested in these. They're awesome, they fit perfect. I installed the oil filter. I filled it with oil, 9 quarts to start. I checked oil leaks. I removed the DME because I don't want it to fire up. And I installed the accelerator pedal. Now I basically got everything done, and all I want to do is crank it for just a minute or two just to see how it sounds and if I have any mechanical issues or anything like that. So let's get right into it. All right, so I've never had a first start actually work the very first time, but I've done all my checks and balances to make sure that everything is done and that I've de-risked myself as much as possible. So let's just get right into it. A little nervous, I gotta admit. I always get nervous for first starts, and I've had a lot of them. It's always the same feeling every time. But I know that the engine isn't gonna break. It turned over, it's got oil pressure, everything looks good. Might as well just do it. Throttle actuator's moved, I hear the fuel pump, and here we go. Yes! Okay. All right, throttle's not working, but it's idling. It's idling. That's good. It's idling rough. Nothing's working there. All right. Okay. Worked. Yes! Any leaks? Let's check for leaks. Nothing. Nothing. No leaks. First time start. Oh my God, can you ask for anything better? Well, yeah, I guess the throttle could work. That could be one thing that works. All right, let's do another start just for posterity's sake. And you know, sometimes after the very first start, things don't work. Then you kind of do it again and it works. But I think the engine just needs to work into itself. It just needs to, you know, feel and, you know, learn and all those things. Let's do another start. Like clockwork. Hey, it works. Easy, easy. Let's check underneath. Looking good, looking good. It's an Alpha N tune. Let's hear what it sounds like from the back. That's what it sounds like from the back. Now let me put this back on, and let's just do a quick conclusion, because it is done. It fired up, it idles, it sounds good. I am just so stoked right now. I am so happy about this, and it was my very first first attempt start. It started and it ran good. So the engine is so solid. I'm so excited about moving on to this next project, the next stage. I can't even talk. And that is going to be the first drive. So thank you guys for watching. Enjoy. I hope you learned a lot in this episode, and in the next episode, we're gonna get this thing on the road and actually start driving it. I'm out of here, guys. Later.